The year is 2008. The nuclear sun is shining bright, Blockbuster is still very much in business, and Netflix is still just a small little company shipping DVDs by mail. Social media is very unrecognizable, with MySpace still sitting at its throne and Facebook having yet to overtake it. Emo fringe is in sight at malls everywhere, and weebs are Naruto running around Anime Expo. It's the peak of 2000s commercialism, even if the US is balls deep in a financial recession. And out there, in the middle-class paradise that was Warped Tour, a band takes the stage, with blaring hip-hop beats featuring clunky bars about hedonism and irony, and with that, the world would change forever. And the takeover of one of the most controversial music genres would begin. When it comes to music, there are some genres seen as time capsules for their eras, and a lot of times in the worst way. Fads that seemed like the future, but only end up being not only the butt of the joke, but reviled for how corny and so of the time that they can be. Though most times this is to an unfair degree. Genres that fit the bill would be nu metal, post-grunge, new wave, and whatever the fuck that cringy shit the Beatles made was when they sing about octopuses and getting shot in the streets of New York. But these genres often got smoke that they didn't deserve. Nu metal gave us one of the most interesting and diverse genres of metal that we have ever seen, and new wave is one of the biggest reasons synthesizers ever got popular and became a household instrument adopted by the masses. And despite how much I personally think the Beatles suck, it's safe to say that rock music and its derivative genres probably wouldn't exist without them. I mean, even Black Sabbath has its roots with the Beatles.
I was walking down this road and I heard the Beatles for the first time, and it was like, wow. When I heard She Loves You, a light went up in my head and I was just besotted with them.
Though the big difference from any of these genres and Crunkcore is that most of them were always meant to be taken seriously, and most got to reign for close to a decade before burning up in flames, where Crunkcore really only had 3 to maybe 5 years, and maybe just a little bit longer if you include the time it spent as a zombie walking. But despite its meme status and the short-lived time it had in the spotlight, Crunkcore has left a lasting impact, and in many ways its DNA can still be found all over the place today. But even for those who were around to experience it, Crunkcore has just about always sat in an odd and hard to understand place. So why don't you and me just take a minute to deep dive and try to understand just what the hell was Crunkcore.
Get loose, get away. Every day, PC-13, and you know we're here to stay. These hoes, blowing up my phone when I walk up in the club. You know I'm in the zone like anybody that I love, I'll be crashed out, bottle out. Oh, that drunk, get the party out.
You have Pete Wentz, who's huge right now, and he's a big supporter of you. You're on his label, and his music is completely opposite of yours. How do you think that relationship is going to actually come together?
Pete has some crazy lyrics, like, you know what I mean? You really have to break down their lyrics and understand what they're saying. It's kind of the same thing as rap, you know? They're just doing it in a different way.
Alright, now before we get into the topic at hand, in order to really understand just how something as out of pocket as Scene Kids screaming about 40 ounces and being hood came to be, we have to understand the roots from which it grew. And the funny thing is that the answer to that is far more convoluted and complex than one would ever really think. There are a vast array of artists who have little to no real crossover with the genre, yet serve as the primordial soup that Crunkcore would spawn from. But first, we need to define the two words that make up the very name. The obvious here is crunk and core. Crunk refers to a subgenre of hip-hop that was defined by its upbeat nature, debaucherous lyrics about partying, drinking, and sex. It's essentially just a very specific flavor of party hip-hop, and can really be defined as just Lil Jon and the East Side Boys. Now, the other word here would be core. Now, core very obviously references hardcore punk, a subgenre that would evolve into its own thing over time, and is more or less just a fast-paced, heavy genre of music that's really defined by its aggression, emotive lyrics, and harsh sound. But if I'm being honest here, the core side of things is actually a bit of a misnomer. By the late 2000s, the word core was being used as a suffix to less represent the actual genre of hardcore, and more so just refer to scene. If it sounded like dudes with choppy hair, whiny voices who shopped at Hot Topic made it, it was core. Hence the comically long list of core genres that had been coined come the early 2010s. So it begs the question, how did these polar opposites come together? And well, like a lot of things post 1999, it all starts with nu metal. Many of the popular bands in the 2000s post-hardcore scene were fans of nu metal, being the kids who grew up with it during the mid to late 90s before forming their own bands. And while the whole post-hardcore scene was more or less completely removed, it wouldn't stop acts from incorporating some nu metal flair into their own music. From First to Last would feature a cheesy rap verse in their hidden track on Dear Diary, as well as Fall Out Boy would consistently flirt with pop music and even include parodies of hip-hop tropes in some of their music videos. And it was these little nods from across the scene that would create a little bit of a crossover with other artists who were more directly in those scenes, with Fall Out Boy themselves actually directly being the ones to break that barrier the most, with them collaborating with the early emo hip-hop outfit Gym Class Heroes.
Not much of a girlfriend. I never seem to get along. It's been a while since we last spoke. This is gonna sound like a bad joke, but mama, I fell in love again. It's to say I have a new girlfriend.
Gym Class Heroes was one of the first bands to cross emo and hip-hop together and make some real waves in the music industry, with their unique blend of rock, hip-hop, and R&B elements.
I remember when I first laid eyes on you. My man Tom introduced us, but I was too shy to say hi. When I finally built up enough nerve to drop a line, you made it clear you wasn't just another MySpace mystery, and I didn't take it personally.
All while being signed to Pete Wentz's Decadence imprint of Fueled by Ramen Records, and touring with many of the other Molgoth outfits and playing Van's Warped Tour, exposing a less traditional and far more palatable form of hip-hop to an audience that would otherwise be untapped. They might be mostly forgotten today, but for their time they were massive, with multiple songs being radio staples, and frontman Travie McCoy even being an early boyfriend of Katy Perry, someone who will come up again later in the story. Perry herself being a partner who would only boost Travie's overall profile and kept eyes on him and his band past their initial 15 minutes of fame. And bit of a fun fact, Travie's actually speculated to be one of the dudes that You're So Gay is about. Now, around the same time in 2006, you had a group of country bumpkins from Georgia put out a record called Business Up Front, Party in the Back. Family Force 5 is one of the most out there bands to come from the 2000s. They were eclectic, obnoxious, and had one of the dumbest names that I've ever heard. But most importantly, they were popular. Probably one of the closest things that we would get to a proto-crunkcore due to their use of crunk in their music, as well as the cheesy white boy raps and the fashion sense.
You never really see it coming, cause it hits you so fast. When you're getting supersonic, baby, then you know it's gonna last. Talk to me now, let go of yourself, it'll be good for your health.
And as you can hear, the ironic crunk bits mixed with hard rock and emo was starting to really take shape with them, and as goofy as this band was, they were extremely influential and served as yet another gateway artist for many future fans, even garnering a reputation for being a Christian alternative to MSI. And yeah, I probably should have mentioned that. They were a Christian group, and because of that, you couldn't escape them at youth groups or any sort of Christian event for a damn near decade. And thanks to that, it introduced an even more unlikely group to later become fans of what would become known as Crunkcore. Now, on the topic of MSI, they would also serve as another unlikely piece of the puzzle, as vulgar, sexually explicit music fusing synth pop elements with hip hop songs, all featuring a plethora of slurs and depravities. Their whole shtick just fit the bill really well. And in a lot of ways, you would see it in artists like Blood on the Dance Floor, and especially Broken Side. Plus, they would also share some of the alleged similarities with other Crunkcore artists, but that's a topic for another video. These artists and sounds would not only serve as some of the inspirations behind Crunkcore, but would also create the environment needed for such a scene to emerge, with emo kids and mall goths getting into various flavors of hip-hop, enjoying genre-bending music with more eclectic and bizarre aesthetics, and sexually explicit and party-themed music. Now, come 2008, Crunkcore was already beginning to see some early success in the underground, with many of the would-be famous acts getting their starts and beginnings, all while making a small splash in their own ways. Though, I would be remiss to not mention two other artists who inadvertently broke down the doors for Crunkcore, and that would be Hollywood Undead and Metro Station. Miley Cyrus's brother's band would be one of the most popular takes on the whole scene pop thing that was going on at the time, where it was essentially just pop rock with a mall goth coat of paint on it, bringing not only more new fans with more mainstream tastes to the mix, but doing the opposite and opening the doors for people who would more or less puke at the idea of pop music and get them to even start listening to it. And as for Hollywood Undead, they're far from being an actual Crunkcore band, but once again an edgy party band with a nu metal aesthetic and rap rock music, becoming one of the breakout mainstream acts of 2008. Well, it did exactly what you think it did, and opened the floodgates wide, all with one simple little song that goes something like,
everywhere I go, bitches always know the Charlie scene has got a weenie that he loves to show. Everywhere I go, bitches always know the Charlie scene has got a weenie that he loves to show. Wake up, grab beer, grab rear, shave beard, put on some scene gear.
What's with the
Yeah, there's like a
what's with the
petition.
haterade, man?
There's
What
a
is with the
petition
haterade
going
on Broken
Dude,
Side?
I don't know.
People
It's
just
just
drink a lot of hate.
closed-minded. I don't know. Like we make music to have fun. I thought music was about having fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we don't care. Like I always say at every show, we don't care about money, fame. We care about our fans most importantly, and for people to have fun at shows. Because I know all of us have bad days. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And when you go to a show, you go to have fun and get away from that. So that's what Broken Side tries to do.
Alright, for those of you familiar with the genre, you may have noticed that in the previous section, I neglected to bring up quite possibly the most important artist in Crunkcore's formation. And that artist would be the one and only 303.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, party! Thursday, Friday, Saturday, party! Sunday, better find somebody else, so for one day I don't have to clean up after myself.
The Boulder, Colorado duo were the first true Crunkcore artists, at least in the sense that they had combined just about all the elements together in order to create the true template the whiny, scream-laden material of the latter artists would pull from. The band initially got its start as a satirical parody act. Now, that's not to say that they were Weird Al making parody cover songs. Rather, they were veiled in large amounts of irony and satire. Mostly that of being two white dudes making crunk music filled to the brim with purposely trashy lyrics and lines that are meant to sound intentionally cringy.
To tongues, always pressed to your cheeks, while my tongue is on the inside of some other girl's teeth. You tell your boyfriend, if he says he's got beef, that I'm a vegetarian and I ain't fucking scared of him.
And just about all of this was captured in their first music video, Holler Till You Pass Out.
Is it getting hot in here or is it just me? Is it getting hot in here or is it just me? Is it getting hot in here or is it just me? Is it getting hot in here or is it 303?
The self-titled debut from the band would not have been the breakthrough to the mainstream that would come later, but it was a bold and fresh sound that made waves in the underground, quickly becoming a MySpace classic and inspiring many artists to start taking their own stabs at this very sound. During this time, another group similar to 303 would begin to pop up, but this one was far more steeped in the scene iconography. You knew they were going to show up, the kings of Crunkcore, Broken Side. They can easily be seen as Crunkcore's mascot. They may not have been the biggest band from the genre, but they were one of the biggest. Though most importantly, they had all the major staples, and are probably the most pure embodiment of the sound and what you think of when the term Crunkcore is uttered. Broken Side, like 303, wouldn't instantly see success, but they would in a few short years take over as one of the top acts in the Warped Tour scene. And it's really easy to see why. Even at this early juncture in 2007, the band was knee-deep in the stylings that would make them famous. With the trashy lyrics, crunk beats, scene fashion, the initial test formula that the Colorado boys started was perfected by New Mexico.
Have sex, you'll probably get attached, girl. Pay me, I don't fuck for free. You know all of these scene bitches wanna fuck with me. Let me go.
Now, if we jump across the country around the same time, in the gator-infested state of Florida, the band that would not only serve as the genre's most hated, but also most iconic artist would begin its start as well.
It's like somebody just got killed in here. And of course, fabulous Tommy Vanity. Good morning, world. I love you.
Blood on the Dance Floor can, in many ways, be seen as the true poster children of Crunkcore. Broken Side might be the stereotype, but Blood had the longest staying power of any of the other artists in this pool, and took part in just about every sound the genre had to offer, bringing their own innovations, and while never sitting at the heights of some of the other bands, BOTDF was the biggest of the original scene, and in many ways, Davi Vanity can be looked at as the main character of Crunkcore. The original incarnation of BOTDF was actually a band that was started as a joke. It featured Davi and three nobodies who I won't even bother naming, as they were only really around for a brief period. As once their first album, Let's Start a Riot, came out, The band realized that they couldn't afford to tour, and everyone but Davi would more or less just abandon the project. But being this early into the scene, what did this record even sound like? It sounded like shit. Riot has much more of a unique sound to it than most of the other artists did at that time, feeling much more like an actual band with direct attempts at blending genres and taking those crunk elements and toning them down with more synth pop and almost new wave style sounds, all wrapped in some clumsy singing and outright awful vocal performances. Outside of Davi himself, it's almost unrecognizable, though after everyone left in the same year, the first real attempt to create the sound that Blood would be famous for would come to be with the second record. It's hard to be a diamond in a rhinestone world. During the creation of this record, Davi would begin to work with Garrett Ecstasy, and the real formation of a dynamic duo that the project would be embodied by was born. And the success of Rhinestone and the following EPs, much of the material from would later be repurposed for an upcoming record, would pave the path for the band. And not just because it served as a large crossroads of all the different stylings that Crunkcore had to offer at the time, but also because the aesthetic was perfected by BOTDF. The fashion and aesthetic of Crunkcore cannot be understated in how big of a part it played in its success. If we take a look back at 303, they more or less looked like your typical guys, and Broken Side was kind of in a middle ground where they still looked like scene kids, but with more of a street fashion edge to them. And in the case of BOTDF, they took the street aesthetic that Broken Side was messing with and fused it with over-the-top scene hair and accessories, as well as brought a huge anime, and I'm gonna puke saying this because of how much I love Visual K, but Visual K element to the whole thing. And it attracted large amounts of attention from online gawkers who were not only looking to mock this obtuse and admittedly stupid look, but also attract even more fans who enjoyed that very Japanese style aesthetic. But with that being said, even with BOTDF quickly becoming a frontrunner of the scene, the one thing that would persist consistently from beginning to end with them was the general hate and disdain that they received. Well, later on, it would be for Davi's reputation and the various allegations against him. Back in the day, it was for having terrible music and lyrics so bad they made your skin itch. Texting on my sidekick, those extensions so thick, you can suck my dick. So get in my chair, let me pimp your hair, let me pimp that hair, turn that music up, let's get fucking wasted super fuck. This era would be defined by the unified front that many of these artists had at the time, touring together and garnering cult fan bases all across the internet. Though at this point there was also growth of another side to the Crunkcore scene, with many scene pop groups like Metro Station and Cobra Starships seeing a lot of success at the time. And through this, a handful of groups that would prop up and essentially play the middle ground between them and the greater Crunkcore scene would also prop up. One of the first and biggest was Breathe Carolina, yet another duo from Colorado who had a similar visual aesthetic and feel to Crunkcore, but whose sound eschewed much of the hip-hop and over-the-top influence in favor of more club-flavored pop. They wouldn't instantly become a big act, but would slowly climb their way up, with each release seeing them get higher and higher until eventually outgrowing the Crunkcore wave entirely, but not without bringing a lot of eyes and ears to it during their early days. Though, arguably, the band that was part of this more pop side of things that would have the biggest splash would be the Millionaires.
This ain't no A&E, you won't see me on intervention. Straight A student, honor rolling, sneaking vodka in detention.
The Millionaires were yet another group started as more or less a joke. They were just a bunch of teenage girls at the time who were fucking around on GarageBand making dumb songs, and due to the over-the-top nature of the music, it would lead to some early virality, and in only a year, the trio would go from a small group of friends making joke songs to headlining tours across the states and even being featured on MTV's Total Request Live. While they've been mostly forgotten to time at this point, the Millionaires were the band that gave one of the biggest mainstream splashes to the Crunkcore scene, and paved the path for the trashy party girl wave of pop music that would stand as the dominant genre for the late 2000s and early 2010s.
We kind of poked fun at it with the documentary, just because like the best thing you can do to clear your head is to kind of like literally admit like, all right, we're making a record, a lot of people are expecting a lot, but what the hell, like let's just have fun with it.
If you disappoint every single person, then you can't really fail, right?
2009 and 2010 would serve as the years that Crunkcore reigned with an iron fist. Despite being massively hated and reviled by the masses, much like nu metal, the actions of everyone around it spoke more than any mean comments or rant videos could. It didn't matter what anyone really said, because the fact is, many of these artists were selling out shows, headlining festivals, and getting TV appearances. To return to the granddaddies of the genre, 303 at this point had become straight up pop stars. Their sophomore record, Want, would be a huge turning point.
When I come up in the club, I'm acting mad dumb. Ladies looking at me, tell them come and get some. 'Cause I'm sipping on some Jack, sipping on.
It refined the sound that they had started out with their debut and upped its production value, and even taking a few of the more popular songs from it and recreating them for what in many ways was their true debut. And to say that Want was big is a massive understatement. And with the band beginning to see some mainstream notoriety, they would end up grabbing the attention of Atlantic Records, who would re-release the album with some bonus tracks. This would include a feature from Kid Cudi, as well as a remix of Starstruck, which would feature Katy Perry.
I think I should know how to make love to something innocent without leaving my fingerprints out. Now.
Katy at this point was beginning to become one of the biggest pop idols of her time, and Starstruck would not only go on to be one of the most famous songs from the band, but a collaboration that opened even bigger doors and brought even more attention to them. And this would all show with the friendships they had began fostering around this time. They had fostered friendships with many of the artists more directly related to the underground Crunkcore scene, but during this period they would also become featured and friends with rising stars like not just Katy Perry but Kesha. And Kesha would even return the favor by appearing on their third record, Streets of Gold. And while this record more or less saw them limit the Crunkcore influence and enter a more generic pop direction, the massive success of it would bring many new eyes and ears to Crunkcore, as new fans would not only get into 303, but the other artists that they were related to. Also, this crossover with pop stars would lead to production and ghostwriting gigs that would allow them to get that sound even closer to the mainstream pop radio stations by ghostwriting and doing production work with Kesha herself, as well as many others. Though there was another rising star of this era that they would work with, and that would be one of the Crunkcore legends that I neglected to mention up this far. And his name is Jeffree Star.
Jeffree, listening with you, man.
Oh my god, I'm back in LA, we're taking over. I'm recording my album with Akon, it's going down.
Nice, nice. Let me get a shot of both of you guys together. Do you guys have the same hairstylist?
Yeah.
Nice.
We're cousins.
Oh my.
Sorry, Mom.
Jeffree is one of those characters who is the living embodiment of a chameleon, existing everywhere and crossing paths with everyone. Not only was he there to collaborate with Hollywood Undead in their early days and appear in photo shoots with Davey Havoc of AFI and music videos with Aiden, or even be one of the first artists to help put Crunkcore on the map with his early EPs.
Limo tinted lipstick, secrets knife thin. Can you see it? Crushed diamonds, dollar bills in my purses.
I neglected to bring Jeffree up because he more or less followed the same story arc as everyone else that I've mentioned previously. But it was his breakout into the commercial world where he would have the biggest impact, even leveraging his popularity and cult status past his music career to launch himself into becoming a massive YouTuber and kingpin of the makeup industry. But during Crunkcore's peak, Jeffrey would evolve into a pop star himself with his 2009 album, Beauty Killer.
So self-obsessed with my mascara and mistakes. Vanity's like a funeral and everyone's at my wake.
Once again crossing the world of Crunkcore and pop, featuring Breathe Carolina on a track, making their star shine even brighter, and even introducing them to a mainstream audience. But this record is also notable because it has another famous feature, and that would be Nicki Minaj, years before she would become a terror upon the pop industry as one of its biggest players.
I'm a superstar on Hollywood Boulevard, and I can make all of the boys come.
These crossovers with the mainstream really show just how big the whole thing had gotten, but even this is nothing compared to the cult acclaim that the whole genre had built in the underground. Breathe Carolina are a fantastic example of this, as they would also become a big artist in their own right. While they never did break out of the Warped Tour scene during their original incarnation, they would constantly flirt with fame, with their sophomore record Hello Fascination becoming a massive hit, and their follow-up and even more pop-laden record Hell's What You Make It actually getting some charting on the Billboard and got some radio play. In many ways, Breathe Carolina served as that bridge between the mainstream Crunkcore artists that were doing TV appearances and the more underground acts from the same scene, further closing that gap between them. Now, Broken Side would also be on this wave, playing some bigger tours and getting their own TV spots, but after their first record, they would really begin to falter in popularity, as they were seen as a bit of a one-trick pony, and sadly this was the same fate met with honorable mention here, Curve. Along with fellow pioneers, the Millionaires, who during this period essentially got upstaged by the likes of Kesha and Katy Perry, who adopted the trashy girl lyrics and style and repurposed it into more radio-friendly songs. But the band that probably had the biggest arc during this era would be Blood on the Dance Floor. As I said, Davi is a bit of the main character of Crunkcore, and in many ways the story of BOTDF carries just about all the hallmarks of everyone else. After years of shape-shifting lineups and stylistic changes, come 2010, Blood would not only find themselves as the top dog in the underground side of the genre, but the trendsetters. Davi would begin to work with longtime bandmate J. Vaughn Monroe and put out Epic, an album both beloved and hated as it contains many of the band's biggest hits and a lot of self-snitching anthems. Blood would become a staple of the Warped Tour and emo scene from here on out, and Epic would be a big hit overall, though around this time the beginning of the end would begin to foreshadow itself, as just as their star would rise, an allegation would strike that would be a permanent scar for the band. A young streamer no older than the age of 11 at the time would allege that they were in a relationship with Davi Vanity, with both of these characters being frequent targets of the website Sticky Drama, a gossip rag from yesteryear. And this is where the original interest and spark of controversy would hit for BOTDF, with them even putting up a post about Davi's old arrest record from 2009 regarding another incident. Now, we all know how things went with Jesse Slaughter, with them becoming the target of internet trolls en masse, which would serve as something to sweep under the rug the previous controversy with Davi himself. Though these rumors and the general disdain for Blood on the Dance Floor would alienate the band from much of the rest of the scene, especially when Davi would make the fantastic choice of writing a diss track about the 11-year-old and make things worse, as he did this again in 2013. Despite all the adversity and allegations though, BOTDF would continue to rise and reign in a large cult following, playing multiple years at Warped Tour, and with their follow-up to Epic, All the Rage, would end up putting out one of their most well-known songs. In many ways, Bewitched served as a new birth for the band, as from here on out, while never fully severing their Crunkcore roots, with each release, they would stray more and more into the scene pop side of things that Breathe Carolina did, just with way cringier album art and borderline cult of teenage fans. And post-2013, the band would follow the same path as many others and lose more and more relevance with time, with each year having more and more controversy and allegations reappear before eventually fading away and breaking up in 2016. And as we're all aware of by this point, Davi's past and countless allegations would prop up in the late 2010s, permanently putting an end to his popularity and chance to climb his way back up. And in many ways, it was Davi's reputation over the years that would alienate and push away more and more people from the scene. And as Blood stayed the face of Crunkcore well past their transition away from it, it didn't matter. And the genre stayed stained by not only its cringy elements that were seen as nothing but laughable by that point, but one mired in unforgivable actions.
What, those flashing lights outside? Oh, that's just like a party going on outside across the street or something. Listen, you're doing just fine in there. This track is gonna be a hit in court. Just keep doing what you're doing. Lock the booth, make sure he doesn't leave.
As the old adage goes, all great things must come to an end. And come 2012, the whole Crunkcore thing would finally see a massive decline, with just about every staple act falling out of relevance or just breaking up. Broken Side would become a duo who looked less like competent artists aware of the satire that they took part in, and now more looked like middle-aged drug addicts well past their prime. The Millionaires had more or less faded in popularity, being crushed by their old foes such as Kesha, and being relegated to just an old memory. And Jeffree Star, who had more or less become a basic pop artist at this point, would put out his final single in 2013. And this was the fate of just about everyone from the original Crunkcore wave. The early 2010s brought bigger and more palatable waves, with the crabcore and electronicore bands more or less melding together. Post-hardcore at this point had essentially just turned into those punk goes pop albums, and overall there wasn't a ton of room for the wild and obtuse shenanigans of Crunkcore anymore, because the whole Warped Tour scene at this point had really shifted into this massive hug box of bands who wanted to save your life and be there for you during your hard times, and it just held very little room for over-the-top, debaucherous, and offensive acts out to cause trouble. I mean, even Attila, who was a massive band in their own right, would see a lot of controversy and really be one of the only acts still doing the whole I don't give a fuck, I'm partying thing. And the only artists to really survive this era from the Crunkcore wave would be Blood on the Dance Floor and Breathe Carolina, with both of them more or less shedding their Crunkcore skin and starting to take steps into moving into different directions. Breathe Carolina would more or less just become an EDM act and go play out festivals, and, well, Blood on the Dance Floor we already talked about. They would see some success, fade in popularity, and, well, it hasn't been a fun month to be Davi Vanity for, let me just check here, I don't know, maybe a few years? Oh, and just because I'll never have a chance to talk about this again, there was also that time before his complete cancellation that Davi tried to become a Marilyn Manson clone and would put out some of the most hilariously bad music videos of this era. But outside of that, essentially everyone was either extremely irrelevant or broken up. So this would realistically be the death of Crunkcore, right? The mass decline? Well...
You got a problem, bitch? Throw your hands up. It's you against me. This shit is one-on-one. If you didn't notice, bitch, I don't give a fuck. I'll punch you in the face, cause you're just such a cunt.
By the mid-2010s, the genre had become more or less a zombie walking, shambling its way back into relevance every now and again, and typically in pretty negative lights. The aforementioned Unicorns Killed My Girlfriend would be one of the biggest catalysts for that, as they came across as a complete parody of the entire thing, though it was actually hard to tell if it really was a parody or a serious project. The Unicorns Killed My Girlfriend rabbit hole runs extremely deep, and a majority of their online content is all but lost to time outside of some archives here and there. And outside of that meme-riddled music video that was essentially all they had to offer, they were just a small breath of life for a minute before once again fading away. Outside of them, you also had one of their frequent collaborators, which was Hair Jordan, a once popular emo tuber now turned content farm. But aside from that and the occasional person trying to just stoke the flames of nostalgia a little prematurely, Crunkcore was essentially dead. Either it was projects that no one knew about, or artists that you wish you didn't, and mostly served as just punching bags for the masses during the cringe era. Well, that is outside of one artist. By this point, Aisha Erotica has become a bit of an icon. During the same era that many of these zombie acts would stumble from the Crunkcore grave, Aisha would break onto the scene in 2015, putting out material that was so authentically MySpace, it's a common misconception that she's been around longer than she really has. And given the relative mystery around most of her online presence since it's constantly been deleted and re-uploaded and full of misinformation, it makes sense. Her music is very much a culmination of Crunkcore, late 2000s club music, and overall pop sensibilities. While I wouldn't fully pigeonhole Aisha as Crunkcore, she was definitely someone who took a lot of what the Millionaires and Jeffree Star were doing during their reign in the scene and pushed it to the limits even further. I mean, she had an entire EP dedicated to antinatalism, songs that are so overly sexual it would make the WAP controversy of 2020 look like a fucking joke. The music was very much a spiritual successor or the last remaining remnant of Crunkcore, depending on how you want to look at it. And in a lot of ways, it served as the bridge between a lot of what hyperpop would become. And while someone like Aisha probably would have served as an artist that would help revive the genre during the mid-2010s, her initial run would eventually be cut short. While Aisha and her collaborators were seeing a lot of underground success and growing popularity at the time, as always, a rising profile brought rising controversy. And the info on her exit could be a little confusing as for various reasons, but the big ones here were some racist accusations and personal distrust with collaborators that would lead to her getting doxxed. And the aftermath of this would be her taking everything down and putting out a farewell statement expressing her discomfort with fame and online notoriety. While Aisha would eventually come back to music in 2023, her exit from the industry in 2018 would also really be the final nail in the coffin for the original run of Crunkcore, as she was the last remnant of relevance to the genre, even if she was a distant connection at best, with Crunkcore now just being a fading memory that really only lived in meme culture and scene nostalgia. To once again bring up my agrotech video, I talked about how old genres always have a chance to come back, whether it's a tasteful homage bringing new ideas and innovations to an older sound, similar to what artists like Male Tears or even Ocean Grove do, or it's cannibalizing an old genre to create something new that still holds the DNA of the past, which can be seen with hyperpop and Crunkcore itself. Hyperpop, while now starting to waver in popularity, was in many ways a rebirth of Crunkcore, as many of its hallmarks, fashions, and iconography can be found all over the place with it. Though that's not to say that all hyperpop dips into the Crunkcore pool, as there's various takes on the genre, but to say that there isn't a large sect of it that isn't a outright worship of what Crunkcore was, well, if you need examples of just how much hyperpop takes from Crunkcore, look no further than Food House. The duo consists of the son of Tony Hawk and the lost member of Brokenside. Food House doesn't just take influence, they outright celebrate Crunkcore. The outfits, the graphics, the overall aesthetic, it just screams 2009 MySpace. Though this is somehow less obnoxious and much better produced. And just to prove the point, just listen to a bit of this song. And it's not just Food House doing this sort of thing either. Even the genre's poster children, 100 Gex, took influence from Crunkcore as well. And even lesser known acts such as That Kid make more music reminiscent to the scene pop era of Crunkcore. While none of these artists are Crunkcore themselves, at least in the traditional sense, it's easy to see how the genre has essentially taken a new life within hyperpop. And in many ways, hyperpop mirrors Crunkcore in its infamy, being one of the most divisive genres to come to prominence at the end of a decade, veiling itself in a mixture of humor, irony, and genuine interests, aiming to cross boundaries and embrace gaudy fashion and leave its mark in pop culture. As unlikely as it may be, the DNA of Crunkcore may be here to stay for the long term, as hyperpop will fade just the same, but I think it's safe to say that both it and Crunkcore's DNA will more than likely be cannibalized and repurposed again by another generation. A musical phoenix, if you will. Well, a musical phoenix with neon hair, debaucherous lyrics, and Osiris shoes. But with all that being said, I do have something to show you before we go. This is my wall of shame. The list of people who hate having money enough to give it to a Z-list channel like mine. These pay piggies keep the lights on and help fund the channel. If you would like to see your own name on this list, consider throwing me some support on Patreon or Ko-fi. Links are in the description. Subscribe, follow me on Twitter, join the Discord, and I'll see you in the next video.